Good morning and welcome to your Friday briefing here on Shift by MSNBC. I'm Luke Brusser coming to you live from New York City today. 9 victims are being remembered from coast to coast this morning as the nation takes stock and comes to grips with Wednesday night's terrible rampage. Vigils have been held in cities across the country from Chicago to Denver, Portland, and right here in New York. And lawmakers in Washington are taking stock as the nation grieves here. President Obama said this yesterday.
There is something particularly heartbreaking about a death happening in a place in which we seek solace and we seek peace. I've had to make statements like this too many times. Communities like this have had to endure tragedies like this too many times. At some point, we as a country will have to reckon with the fact that this type of mass violence does not happen in other advanced countries. And it is in our power to do something about it.
Joining me now from Washington is NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray, and here in New York, MSNBC's Jane Timm. Thanks to both of you. And Mark, I'll start off with you. Obviously, a harrowing story coming out of South Carolina this week. But when we put it in political terms, President Obama, he had an edge to him yesterday during that press conference, making his case once again that something needs to be done to try and limit the ability of guns into the hands of criminals, but also the mentally ill. The availability of guns is simply too easy, and he's had to make too many of these speeches. Mark Knoller, our colleague at CBS, said that this is the 14th address that he can remember from President Obama, or statement regarding a mass shooting during his tenure as president. All that being said, when it comes to 2016 presidential politics, when it comes to congressional politics, gun legislation won't go anywhere.
Yeah, what you ended up hearing from the president was kind of an exasperation, and it was so palpable, Luke, and you're right about that. And what he was really referring to was just the lack of political will. And of course, we saw in 2013 there was a big fight to be able to have background checks for gun purchases that wasn't able to clear a filibuster in the United States Senate. And of course, the prospects in the House of Representatives was even dicier. And so what President Obama was kind of reflecting was there is really no will at all to get things like this done. Now, there is a debate whether or not that even if you had background checks, would that have actually kept the shooter from purchasing a gun? You know, that is kind of unclear. But when you look at just the whole, the politics, President Obama ended up giving some remarks at a fundraiser in California after his remarks that you just ended up showing. And what he said was essentially, look, I know that there's so much that came in when I said, yes, we can. He said it wasn't, the message was never, yes, I can, a lot of things. It's, yes, we can. And if Americans really do get frustrated, it's more than the President of the United States that has to ask, more than just the United States Senate and the House of Representatives. It's American people have to organize and say, you know what, we want to get this done. And that was his message.
The gun groups are just so strong. They have complete control of the Republican Party, and Democrats a lot of times say it's not worth getting in that debate because we're going to lose anyway, so we might as well focus on other issues we think are better. It's really quite striking. Jane, what are the candidates on the trail saying about the tragedy? Have they taken a step back and sort of processed this at all?
Yeah, I mean, there was an event yesterday at GOP Faith and Freedom, you know, same title for every GOP event, it seems, on the trail, and they all said, you know, let's have a moment of silence, how horrible it is, it happened in a church. Most of them were just trying not to step in it by talking about guns or talking about violence. The most surprising one I thought was Dr. Ben Carson. I mean, he's the only African-American in the GOP field, and he came out and said, you know, I've seen a lot of progress in my time on racial violence, which is mind-blowing hours after, you know, 9 people are gunned down in a prayer group. And he said, you know, what's growing is partisan bickering, and, you know, we shouldn't fight over Obamacare because it'll poison us, which just seems like, you know, are you
It's a little
kidding?
all over the place.
It's just out of left field to just, you know, do this. The person who I thought actually came out with quite a bit of class was Bernie Sanders. He sent out an email and said, let's fundraise for this church. Let's help them recover, which seemed like a way to say, you know what, it's not about us at this time. It's about these people who are in mourning.
Carson, it's remarkable because obviously he's a neurosurgeon, and then when you apply that approach to politics, it doesn't always work. It's a different skill set.